Have you ever made a choice so big, so life-altering, that it felt like you were betting your entire future on a single roll of the dice? I did. I walked away from the people I loved most, chasing a career I thought would define me, only to find myself drowning in regret, loneliness, and a truth I never saw coming. My name is Hannah, and this is the story of how I traded my family for a dream, and how that dream turned into a nightmare that's left me questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. If you've ever sacrificed something precious for ambition, or wondered if you can ever go back after burning bridges, stay with me. This isn't just about a job or a family. It's about the cost of chasing what you think you want, and the devastating fallout when you realize it might not be worth it. I'm 38 now, sitting in a sleek, sterile apartment in downtown Chicago, staring out at a skyline that glitters with promise but feels colder than ever. The city hums below me, a constant reminder of the life I fought so hard to build, but all I can think about is the small, messy house in rural Indiana I left behind. A house filled with laughter, arguments, and the kind of love I didn't know how to value until it was gone. I've got a corner office, a title that turns heads, and a bank account most people would kill for, but I've never felt emptier. If you've ever looked at your life and wondered how you got so far from where you started, or if the price of success is worth the ache in your heart, then you'll get why I need to spill this out. Let's go back to where it all began, to the moment I made the choice that changed everything. I grew up in a tiny town called Millhaven, Indiana, where the biggest event of the year was the county fair, and everyone knew your business before you even had a chance to tell it. My childhood was a patchwork of cornfields, dusty roads, and the smell of my mom's homemade apple pie wafting through our creaky old farmhouse. My parents were salt-of-the-earth types. Dad worked as a mechanic, Mom was a part-time librarian, and they raised me and my younger brother, Caleb, with a mix of tough love and quiet pride. Life was simple, predictable, and in my teenage mind, suffocating. I spent hours in my room, staring at the cracked ceiling, dreaming of a world beyond Millhaven, a world of skyscrapers, fast-paced deals, and a name that meant something. I wanted to be somebody, not just another small-town girl fading into the background. By the time I was in high school, I was obsessed with the idea of escape. I'd stay up late reading business magazines I borrowed from the library, fantasizing about becoming a high-powered executive, wearing tailored suits, and commanding boardrooms. My grades were my ticket out, and I pushed myself relentlessly, earning a scholarship to a decent college in Indianapolis. That's where I met Mark, a sweet, unassuming guy studying engineering, who had the kind of steady, grounded energy that balanced my restless ambition. He was from a nearby town, just as small as Millhaven, and he understood the pull of roots even as I was desperate to cut mine. We fell in love over late-night study sessions and cheap diner coffee, and by the time we graduated, we were talking about a future together, marriage, kids, a quiet life somewhere familiar. But my dreams were bigger than a picket fence in Indiana. After college, I landed an entry-level job at a marketing firm in Indianapolis, and I threw myself into it with everything I had. I worked late nights, took on extra projects, and networked like my life depended on it. Mark was supportive, even when my ambition started to pull us in different directions. He got a job at a local factory, content with stability, while I was already eyeing the next rung on the ladder. We got married at 25 in a small church in Millhaven, with my family and his cheering us on, and for a while, I thought I could have it all: the love, the family, and the career. 2 years later, we had our daughter, Lily, a tiny bundle of joy with Mark's hazel eyes and my stubborn streak. Holding her for the first time, I felt a love so fierce it scared me. But even then, a part of me was itching to get back to work, to keep climbing. Life as a young mom and a career woman was a juggling act I wasn't prepared for. I'd rush home from the office to relieve Mark, who took on most of the parenting while I chased promotions, only to collapse into bed exhausted, guilt gnawing at me for missing Lily's first words or her wobbly first steps. Mark never complained, but I could see the strain in his tired smiles, the way he'd sometimes look at me like he didn't recognize the woman he married. I told myself it was temporary, that once I reached a certain level, I'd slow down, spend more time with them, be the mom and wife they deserved. But every milestone at work, every raise, every title, only fueled my hunger for more. I wasn't just building a career, I was building an identity, something I could point to and say, this is who I am. I made it. When Lily was 4, the opportunity of a lifetime landed in my lap. A headhunter from a top-tier marketing agency in Chicago reached out with an offer for a senior position, double my salary, a team to manage, and a chance to work on campaigns for global brands. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of, the kind of role that could catapult me into the C-suite someday. But there was a catch. It meant relocating to Chicago, over 3 hours away from Millhaven, from Mark, from Lily. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, the offer letter in my hands, my heart racing with excitement and dread. I knew what it would mean: long distance, weekends spent apart, missing even more of Lily's childhood. But I also knew that saying no might mean giving up on the dream I'd nurtured since I was a teenager staring at that cracked ceiling. I talked it over with Mark, expecting resistance, maybe even an argument. But he just looked at me with those steady hazel eyes and said he'd support whatever I decided, even if it hurt. That quiet acceptance broke my heart more than any fight could have. I spent nights lying awake, torn between the pull of my ambition and the weight of my responsibilities. I thought about my mom, who'd given up her own dreams to raise us, always with a hint of regret in her voice when she talked about what could have been. I didn't want that for myself. I wanted to show Lily that a woman could have big dreams and make them real, even if it meant sacrifice. So, with a mix of determination and guilt, I said yes to the job. Mark and I agreed to a trial period. I'd move to Chicago, we'd do long distance, and in a year, we'd reassess whether they'd join me or I'd come back. Leaving was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I remember packing my suitcase while Lily clung to my leg, her little voice asking why mommy had to go. I knelt down, hugged her tight, and promised I'd be back soon, that I'd call every day, that I loved her more than anything. Mark drove me to the bus station, and as I waved goodbye, I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes, a silent question of whether this was the beginning of the end. I pushed it down, telling myself I was doing this for us, for our future, for the life I wanted to give them. But as the bus pulled away from Millhaven, the weight of what I was leaving behind settled into my chest like a stone, heavy and unmovable. Chicago was a whirlwind from the start. The city was everything Millhaven wasn't: fast, loud, full of possibility. My new job was demanding but exhilarating. I was in meetings with executives who treated me like I belonged, crafting strategies for brands I'd only ever seen on billboards. I rented a small apartment near the Loop, a far cry from our cozy, cluttered house, and threw myself into work to drown out the loneliness that crept in at night. I called Mark and Lily every evening, listening to her babble about preschool and Mark's updates on his day, but the distance felt more than just physical. Their voices sounded farther away with each call, like I was losing pieces of them I couldn't get back. At first, I went home every other weekend, driving the 3 hours each way just to spend 48 hours with them. I'd walk into the house, smell the familiar scent of Mark's cooking, and feel a rush of relief, like I could breathe again. Lily would run to me, her tiny arms wrapping around my neck, and for a moment, everything felt right. But those visits were bittersweet. I'd noticed little changes, new toys I hadn't bought, a drawing on the fridge I hadn't seen her make, inside jokes between her and Mark that I wasn't part of. Mark was kind, always trying to make me feel included, but there was a quiet tension, an unspoken acknowledgement that I wasn't fully there anymore. I'd leave on Sunday nights, my heart aching as I kissed them goodbye, promising myself I'd make it work, that this separation was temporary. But as months turned into a year, the visits became less frequent. Work piled up, late nights, urgent projects, business trips. I'd cancel trips home, telling Mark I'd make it up to them, but I could hear the disappointment in his voice, even if he didn't say it. Lily started asking why I wasn't there for her school events, her voice small and confused over the phone, and each question was a knife to my gut. I'd lie awake in my Chicago apartment, staring at the ceiling just like I did as a teenager, but instead of dreaming of escape, I was haunted by what I'd left behind. I missed the messy, imperfect life in Millhaven, the way Mark's laughter filled a room, the way Lily's sticky fingers felt in mine. But I'd worked so hard to get here, sacrificed so much. How could I walk away from it now? The emotional conflict tore at me daily. I loved my job, the sense of purpose it gave me, the validation of being someone in a world that often overlooked women like me from nowhere towns. But I loved my family more, or at least I thought I did, until I started questioning whether I'd chosen ambition over them. I'd sit in my office, surrounded by awards and framed campaigns, and feel like a fraud. What good was success if it came at the cost of the people who mattered most? I started to resent the job I'd once dreamed of, but I also resented myself for not being content with the life I had before. I was caught in a tug-of-war between two versions of myself, the driven career woman and the devoted mom and wife, and I didn't know which one was the real me anymore. Then came the unexpected twist, the moment that shattered what little balance I'd managed to maintain. It was a Thursday evening, almost 2 years into my Chicago stint, when Mark called me. His voice was different, flat, heavy, like he'd been carrying something for too long. He told me he couldn't do it anymore, that the distance wasn't just physical, that he felt like he was raising Lily alone while I lived a separate life. He said he'd met someone else, a woman from his factory named Sarah, who was there for him in ways I hadn't been. It wasn't serious yet, he swore, just someone he'd confided in, but he felt guilty enough to tell me. He wasn't asking for a divorce, not yet, but he needed me to know where we stood. My world tilted. I sat on my couch, the phone slipping from my hand, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. Mark, my steady, loyal Mark, had found comfort with someone else because I wasn't there. How could I blame him when I'd chosen to leave? The pain was raw, a mix of betrayal and self-loathing. I'd always thought I was the one making the hard choices, the one sacrificing for our future, but I hadn't considered what I was asking of him. I'd left him to carry the weight of our family alone, to be both mom and dad to Lily while I chased my dreams. I spent that night crying, pacing my apartment, looking at old photos of us. Our wedding day on a sunny hill in Millhaven, Lily's first birthday, with cake smeared on her face. I remembered the promises we'd made, the life we'd planned, and how I'd let it slip through my fingers. Anger flared too. Anger at Mark for not fighting harder, for turning to someone else, but mostly at myself for thinking I could have it all without paying a price. In the days that followed, I spiraled. I couldn't focus at work, my mind replaying Mark's words, imagining him with this Sarah, picturing Lily calling someone else mommy. I took a few days off and drove to Millhaven unannounced, desperate to see them, to fix what I'd broken. Walking into the house felt like stepping into a memory. Everything was the same, yet different. Lily ran to me, her hug as tight as ever, but there was a wariness in Mark's eyes, a distance I couldn't bridge. We talked late into the night after Lily went to bed, sitting at the kitchen table where I'd once read that offer letter. He was honest, brutally so, telling me how lonely he'd been, how he felt like a single parent, how Sarah had just been a friend at first but had become a lifeline. I begged him to give us another chance, to let me come back, but he said he didn't know if he could trust that I'd stay, that I wouldn't get restless again. I stayed for the weekend, soaking up every moment with Lily, trying to memorize the feel of her hand in mine, the sound of her giggle. I helped Mark with chores, cooked dinner like I used to, but it felt like playing a role, like we were actors in a play about a family that no longer existed. When I left on Sunday, I didn't make any promises. I just hugged them both, tears streaming down my face, and drove back to Chicago with a hollow ache in my chest. I knew I had to make a choice, really make it this time, not just a half-hearted compromise. But what did that look like? Quitting my job, moving back, and hoping Mark would take me back, even with the shadow of Sarah between us? Or staying in Chicago, accepting that I'd lost them, and trying to rebuild a life alone? Back in the city, I threw myself into reflection, something I hadn't done in years. I walked along Lake Michigan, the wind biting at my skin, and thought about my childhood dreams, how they'd morphed into something I barely recognized. I remembered my dad's calloused hands fixing engines, my mom's quiet strength as she balanced books at the library, and how they'd always put family first, even when it was hard. Had I been wrong to want more? Or was the mistake not in wanting it, but in how I'd gone about it, leaving everyone I loved in the dust? I started journaling, writing down my regrets, my hopes, my fears, trying to untangle the mess inside me. I even called my brother, Caleb, who still lived in Millhaven, and poured out my heart. He listened, then said something that stuck with me. Success doesn't mean much if you've got no one to share it with, hon. But you've got to figure out if you're going back for them, or just for you. Work became a battleground of its own. My performance slipped, and my boss noticed, pulling me aside to ask if I was okay. I wasn't, but I couldn't say it. I'd fought so hard for this position, clawed my way up from a nobody in a nowhere town to a name on a door. Walking away felt like admitting defeat, like all the sacrifices, mine, Mark's, Lily's, were for nothing. But staying meant accepting a life of solitude, of conference calls and empty apartments, of watching my daughter grow up through a screen. I started looking at job listings back in Indiana, smaller roles with less prestige but closer to home. Each application felt like a step backward, a betrayal of the girl who dreamed of skyscrapers, but also like a lifeline to the woman who just wanted her family back. Now, as I sit here in my Chicago apartment, the city lights mocking me with their cold brilliance, I'm at a crossroads I never imagined. Mark and I are in limbo. He hasn't made any decisions about Sarah, and I haven't made any about my career. Lily is caught in the middle, too young to understand why mommy isn't always there, but old enough to feel the absence. I've got a meeting with my boss next week to discuss my future with the company, and I've got a half-written resignation letter on my laptop, waiting for me to decide whether to send it. I've also got a voicemail from Mark, asking if I can come home for Lily's school play next month, his voice softer than it's been in a while, like maybe there's a sliver of hope. But is there? Can I rebuild what I broke, or is it too late? To anyone out there listening, I'm laying my heart bare, searching for answers I can't find on my own. How do you choose between a dream you've chased your whole life and the family you've let slip away? Should I go back to Millhaven, give up everything I've built, and fight for Mark and Lily, even if it means facing the pain of what's happened? Or should I stay here, accept that I've lost them, and try to find meaning in a life I've worked so hard for, even if it feels empty? And how do I protect Lily from the fallout of my choices, no matter what I decide? I'm standing on the edge of a decision that could change everything, again, and I've never felt more lost. I want to believe there's a way to make this right, that love and family can survive even the biggest mistakes, but I don't know how to get there. What would you do if you were me? How do you rebuild a life when you're not sure what pieces are even left? I'm ready to face whatever comes next, but I'd give anything to hear your thoughts as I navigate this mess, one uncertain step at a time.